Welcome back, dear friends, to the Crimson Academy's course on a tribute to His Holiness Abdu'l-Baha. Dear friends, we are picking back up on Hassan Baliuzi's immortal work, Abdu'l-Baha, the Center of the Covenant of Baha'u'llah. We are on Chapter 5, Open Rebellion. Sedition was at first covert. There were dubious hints, veiled complaints, loaded allusions. Then half-truths were given currency. Next, blatant lies were coined. Later still, emissaries of Mirza Muhammad Ali began to travel extensively, and letters began to pour out of the Holy Land, conveying false reports, injecting the venom of violation. In Persia, Agha Jamal Burujirdi, a renowned teacher of the cause, greatly esteemed by the Baha'is who had known imprisonment for the sake of his faith, at odds with the hands of the cause, became the chief advocate of Mirza Muhammad Ali. A story that the present writer heard on several occasions from Ziaullah Asgharzadeh well illustrates the high regard which Baha'is had for the eminent teacher of their faith. When Ziaullah was a very young boy in the village of Milan near Tabriz in northwestern Iran, Agha Jamal visited the Baha'is of that locality. One night, Ziaullah's father invited him and some others to dinner. The young lad's mother told her son, who was particularly fond of a delicacy she was preparing, that should he manage to bring her one of Agha Jamal's shoes, she would reward him with an extra portion. In those days, Persians used to shed their shoes before coming from the street or the courtyard of the house into the carpeted room, and Ziaullah had no difficulty in getting his mother the prize she coveted. Then he found, to his amazement, that his mother was scraping the earth off the sole of the shoe. This earth, she told him, comes from the footgear of a man holy and exalted in rank. It must of necessity possess curative powers. This was how devout Baha'i, simple of heart and unlettered, looked up to Jamal Burujirdi. Of this man, Abdu'l-Baha said in a tablet addressed to Monsieur and Madame Hippolyte Dreyfus Barney, that he was foremost among the Baha'is. To another teacher of the faith, who was as distinguished as Agha Jamal in his time, and who went the same way at a later date, Abdu'l-Baha wrote one of his most significant tablets. He tells him that the magnet which attracts bounties and confirmations in this day is the covenant of God, and that it is the standard against which everything is to be judged. Then he states that should a person become the very personification of the Holy Spirit and yet hesitate for an instant in the path of the covenant, he would be truly of the legion of the lost. The fate of Agha Jamal bore eloquent witness to the truth of Abdu'l-Baha's assertion and stern admonition. Agha Jamal's desperate efforts to feed the blaze of dissension failed. His rank availed him nothing, and he ended his days in misery and obscurity. When rebellion came into the open, it was the center of the covenant who seemed to have been abandoned, isolated in Akka with his sister, his wife, his 4 daughters, and an old uncle. He was even prevented from entering the shrine of his father. There were times when he stood on the plain and performed the devotionals of visitation from a distance. Mirza Muhammad Ali and his associates were in full possession of the mansion, the shrine, and the adjacent houses. They thronged the upper veranda of the mansion and hurled insults at Abdu'l-Baha and those faithful to him whenever they came to pray at the spot where the human temple of Baha'u'llah had been laid to rest. Abdu'l-Baha had toiled hard to create a garden adjacent to the shrine. He had brought fresh soil and water on his own shoulders, assisted by the faithful, to keep the wasteland ever verdant, blooming with flowers. His opponents laid their hands even on that garden, but finding the upkeep expensive and requiring hard work and labor, abandoned it. Shoghi Effendi has stated that some 40 members of Baha'u'llah's family, relatives of the Bab, and eminent figures and teachers of the cause were leagued together to refuse the loyalty due to Abdu'l-Baha, to subvert the covenant of Baha'u'llah. Not content with fomenting discord within the community, they began to vilify Abdu'l-Baha in circles outside. They accused him of having arrogated to himself the titles and the rank of a manifestation of God, of having attempted to bring the family of Baha'u'llah into disrepute. The Ahsan, the branches, whom the manifestation of God had enjoined his followers to love and respect, of giving an importance out of all proportion to the testament of Baha'u'llah, which they contended was a document solely concerned with relations within his family, of inventing a covenant and vainly praising it as a supreme and all-enfolding, of depriving his brothers and sisters of their heritage, of acting as a self-aggrandizing tyrant. To people who were not Baha'is, they would say that Abdu'l-Baha had disinherited his own kith and kin. Baha'u'llah, they would tell them, had never claimed to be a manifestation of God. He was a mystic sheikh, seeking to bring men nearer to God, and it was Abbas Effendi, now styling himself Abdu'l-Baha, who was determined to contrive a new religion. Haji Mirza Haydar Ali, who was an eyewitness, has left on record a description of the life which Mirza Muhammad Ali and his supporters led in the mansion of Bahji. In vivid contrast to Abdu'l-Baha's simple and constricted life within Akka, his detractors were constantly demanding vast amounts of choicest provisions, ordering large quantities of goods and clothing, feasting inordinately, inviting officials to repasts of rich variety. These officials they intended to imbue with hatred of Abdu'l-Baha. They meant to reduce Abdu'l-Baha to the level of impoverishment, drag him down to bankruptcy. But Abdu'l-Baha never refused them the demands they made. Whenever their requests came, he told his steward Agha Rizai Qanand to comply with them. Whenever gifts arrived, Abdu'l-Baha gave instructions to have them taken to Bahji. He tried and tried hard to protect those who plotted against him from the evil consequences of their deeds. He did all that could be done to draw a veil over their disloyalty. To malice that wounded deeply, he returned balm and healing. To Mirza Muhammad Ali, whose designation, the Greater Branch, was the name by which he was known and addressed, whose station was established in Baha'u'llah's testament as next to Abdu'l-Baha, taking precedence over every other Baha'i with the sole exception of the center of the covenant, he, a magnanimous and generous brother, made a fervent appeal. Abdu'l-Baha reminded him that after his own passing, all that he desired would come to him. To this appeal, Mirza Muhammad Ali replied that he had no guarantee that he would outlive Abdu'l-Baha. Hankering after power had destroyed in this son of Baha'u'llah every vestige of trust in his word. He did outlive Abdu'l-Baha by 16 miserable years, a broken, dejected man, repudiated by the world community of Baha'u'llah, recalling to the mind of the beholder the concluding years of the life of Mirza Yahya Subha Azal, the uncle of this member of the second generation of violators. It was at this period that the center of the covenant, in order to give proof to the world of the falsity of the accusation leveled at him by his detractors that he had placed himself on a par with Baha'u'llah, declared that hereafter he was to be known as Abdu'l-Baha, the servant of Baha. He stated that his station was the station of servitude. Violators prolific with fantastic invention retorted that servitude was an attribute of Godhead, and Abdu'l-Baha was now implicitly identifying himself with the creator of the universe. To themselves they applied the epithet Muvahhidin, monotheists, Unitarians, and those who stood firm in the covenant, the epithet Mushrikeen, polytheists. For 4 years, Mirza Muhammad Ali and his associates had their way, and Abdu'l-Baha suffered in silence. But the time came when concealment was no longer possible. Abdu'l-Baha did not take the initiative in denouncing them to the Baha'i world. They themselves, feeling desperate, tore the veil which a wise and forgiving master had drawn over their deeds. Witnessing the gradual ascendancy of the covenant and the rallying of the vast majority of the Baha'is to the center of the covenant, they rushed into the open. Then separation became inevitable. Their futile attempts at subverting the covenant continued through the years, but their decline was swift. They stood revealed to all the Baha'is as authors of discord.